Welcome to Casual Shenanigans Conversations. I'm your host for this conversation, James, and we're joined by Jeremiah.
Hey guys.
And the purpose of these conversations is to allow you to get to know the host a little bit more more in depth than you can on the podcast. So, here we go. Jeremiah, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good, James. It's kind of a weird feeling. You're the one running the show here. Not that I don't trust you or anything, but it's a weird feeling. I have no idea what's coming.
I'll go gentle. I have some basic questions for you, things that people might be interested in knowing about you. First, how did you get into gaming?
Well, I guess like any person around my age, my parents got a computer, and then I guess that would have been in like 95 or 96, so I would have been 6 years old. Yeah, I know. I'm
so when I was graduating high school.
That's not when you were graduating high school.
I graduated in 96.
No.
Yes.
James, there's no 96, really?
Yep.
I thought you graduated in like 99.
Nope.
Okay, well
this is awkward.
So anyway, my parents got a computer when I was like 3 feet tall, and it came with some games on it. I think it was Windows 95, but then my dad bought Myst and Star Wars. I think it was Rebel Assault or Rogue Squadron or Rebel Assault. It was one of the first X-Wing games. And then he got Flight Simulator 95. So started out playing Myst. Obviously, I didn't do really well in Myst. That game is not designed for 6-year-olds. But I did okay in the Star Wars game, whichever one that was. Like, it took me months to make it out of Beggar's Canyon, which I think was the tutorial. So I wasn't very good, but the game had lots of replayability as far as I was concerned. And then my mom, like, just bought a couple educational games. So like I had Math Blaster and some game that taught you Spanish. And did you play Math Blaster in high school? Yeah.
I played in middle school.
Oh, okay. All right. I guess it was older
elementary
than the
year. It's a pretty old game.
Okay. Yeah, I did that. And then, I just bought newer games when my parents bought newer computers. Because like my friends had N64s and PlayStations and stuff, but we never had a game console. So I was limited to whatever I was playing on the PC, which was fine because, and I guess it was 98 or 99, Age of Empires came out, and that was pretty much the only game I cared about for like the next 3 years.
So you've definitely diversified since then.
I have.
I mean, you still play Age of Empires quite a bit, but
I play Age of Empires 2, the HD re-release. It's not really that much more HD, but I've diversified a lot because like I would go to my friend's house and play Super Mario 64 and Star Fox 64, and then whatever games were on the PlayStation. I don't even remember. Gran Turismo, and we weren't playing like any M-rated games. All my friends, their parents were too conscientious to let like their 6, 7, and 8-year-olds play M-rated stuff, but
which I think is good.
Yeah, it probably is good, especially when like there was a lot less political correctness, I think, in M-rated games back then. But we played, if it was a racing game or like a platformer or whatever, we pretty much tried it. But then my parents got newer and newer computers, and I started playing like Need for Speed. Started playing a lot of that. I had friends who liked Need for Speed, and then I just played still Age of Empires, the Lego games. I liked like Lego Island, which is a terrible game. I don't know if you ever played that, but like it's horrible. And then Lego Creator, where it just lets you build Legos inside the computer. I was really big into Legos. And then about like 2003, the computer, like it used to be, you could play whatever games were available on whatever computer was available. Like high-end graphics cards, weren't really that big a thing.
Right.
And then like the early 2000s, that started becoming more and more important. And so I convinced my parents to let's get a GameCube. And then I got a GameCube and then a PS2. And then that's where I did most of my gaming till like 2008 when I built my first personal gaming desktop. Like I always had a desktop of some kind I put together from like spare parts my dad cast off or something. But I didn't really game on it for years and years and years because they fell behind the gaming curve and they couldn't play anything. So I actually had a laptop for my first couple years of community college and then going into college. And I went to a mall and I was like, I'm going to try to get a game for it because it advertised it had like Radeon Pro graphics, 128 megabytes, no, 64 megabytes of graphics memory. I was like, dang, I'm going to get myself a game. And the Half-Life 2 collection was on a shelf in the mall, and I'd never even heard of Half-Life. And I was like, sure, why not? And this is like in 2007, 2008, I bought that.
Wow.
And I was able to play through it on the lowest settings on my laptop. And of course, Half-Life 2 is amazing. As soon as I finished that, I was like, yeah, I got
to start building.
I got to start building, yeah, because that's also right after that is when Crysis came out. And my roommate built a PC so he could play Crysis. And that's pretty much was the tipping point for me. And, I've owned pretty much every console since the year 2000, but I've been doing most everything on a PC since then.
Very nice. Tell me a little bit about maybe one of your favorite memorable gaming experiences.
Memorable gaming experiences. I guess I should pick something that's like at least a couple years old.
It can be recent. I mean, well, when you become 50 or 60, you're gonna look back and say, "Hey, that one night we were doing this."
Like I'll remember any of this. Sitting atop my ivory tower, laughing at all the peasants. When I first discovered Age of Empires, it was at a friend's house. Like we went to visit them, and they had 2 computers set up, like in their library, and they had Age of Empires on both computers.
Was that your first LAN party?
It was. And
right.
And I thought it was kind of cool because, this is back in the day when you could just start up the game on one computer, pop the disc out, pop it into the next computer, start the game up, and then you were good to go. DRM was not that hard to fool, kids. But I saw that, like, you could play against someone else on a competitive game. Like, that was just the coolest thing. But we only had one computer in our house, so we didn't do that. But my brothers and I would always wake up early every morning and then go sit, all of us, in this one desk chair. So 3 boys sitting in one desk chair playing Age of Empires for like 2 or 3 hours until our parents got up and we had to actually do productive things. But that was really fun. But I think, like, if I had to pick a standalone best gaming memory, it would be in college. We got Battlefield 2, and this was after Battlefield 2, like, it had stopped really being super relevant. This was maybe like 2009, 2010, so it was already like 4 years old. And, but that meant it was old enough it would run on pretty much anyone's computer, and we got like 13 or 14 guys in our dorm to get Battlefield 2 on their computers.
Wow.
And some nights it was only like 2 or 3 people, and some nights we'd have 7 or 8, and some nights we'd have 12 people. But like for that entire spring semester right before I graduated in 2010, we played Battlefield like at least a couple nights a week. And then we had like some really, really awesome LAN parties. The last night before graduation, like before everyone left, we had one big party with absolutely everybody on the dorm who had it. And they all got together and we played for like 4 or 5 hours. Just, not online, just playing like a LAN version of it. And that was just awesome because you could hear people screaming and yelling at each other down the hall. And, it was kind of like the magic of Battlefield at its zenith of how good Battlefield used to be, combined with some people who are hardcore gamers and other people who just game every once in a while, all playing together, having an awesome time. And that was really, really good.
I'll have to say, with as good as online has gotten with, just the sound quality and the ease of being able to get into a game, nothing beats an old school LAN party.
Yeah, because like things were so much easier. It wasn't like, oh no, is the server got a lot of ping?
It was a lot harder because you had to bring their computers together.
Well, but I mean, and someone had to know how to like port forward and set everything up. But it was a lot easier because you didn't have to be like, oh, well, does everyone have like, is everyone's tick rate okay? Does everyone have fast enough internet? It was like, no. Does one person have like an 100 megabit switch? Sweet. Like, we're set. No problem.
But technicalities aside, there was just something about it was a different camaraderie when you're playing a game.
Well, it's the same. I think
within earshot.
I think one of the smartest design decisions on the N64, and knowing Nintendo, this is probably a cheapskate decision, was they made the cords so short so that everyone I know who owns an N64 sits on the floor in front of the TV together and plays because the cords weren't long enough.
Oh, I had extensions.
Oh, well, look at you. But I remember someone brought their old N64 back to school, like when I was in college, and they wanted to play Smash or something, and we all picked up a controller, and instinctively everyone sat down next to each other on the floor, and I just thought that was like a pretty cool. There was something different about it. Like you could go over to your friend's house and play games together, and you can't really do that easily anymore. Like, I don't know. It just
there's no point to really anymore.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, I can bring it over, and then we'll both hook up to the internet and play together. like we were on vacation this year and we all had PS4s, and it's not like that made playing Bloodborne any easier. We still had to fight with the server and stuff the entire time.
But it was at least fun to be able to look over and see your friend struggling.
That part still is fun. And that is, I think that's one definite advantage of consoles, is it's a lot less to pack up. Mm-hmm. You can just pick up the box and move it, which I think is pretty cool.
Now, do you have any gaming quirks? Like, do you have certain snacks you like to eat when you're doing a long gaming session? Do you have certain lighting you have your room set up for?
I don't like a pitch black room. I like to always be able to see my keyboard. And I like to always be able to look around and see anything I need to. So I like to run one dim lamp in the corner of the room, and that's it. And I started doing that in college because we had like fluorescent lights overhead. And I'd like to say as a designer, I hate fluorescent lights, but I think pretty much everyone hates fluorescent lights. So we just started running one lamp in the corner, and I've gotten so used to that. That's my setup for absolutely everything now. Like during the day, I don't even have an overhead light in my room. I just have one lamp. So I like a little bit of light. I like it to be fairly cool in the room because my graphics cards are going to heat everything up. I don't know. I like to have water with me. Like I might have a beer or something every once in a while, but I try not to snack too much while I game because I hate getting grease or anything on my mouse. Like if I'm going to eat, I sit back and eat something and don't like I sit far enough away from my computer I can't easily touch it without remembering. I guess that'd be my quirk is I hate food being anywhere near my computer. Beverages are okay as long as they're way off to the side, but I like
it's your baby. It's understandable.
Yeah, well, it's my baby, and like if it's during the workday, like I'm gonna be a moron if I spill a drink in my keyboard and short the computer out. Like that's not really an acceptable excuse to miss a deadline.
It'd make for a great story though for the podcast.
I ruined one of my parents' computers when I was growing up.
Really?
I spilled water into the keyboard, shorted it out. So I guess that always made me it didn't break the entire computer, but it broke a few pieces. Like it was definitely several $100s of damage.
Ooh.
But I was like 8. I didn't know any different. So my parents weren't super mad, but that definitely instilled in me that, hey, like don't screw around with this.
So you talked a little bit about this, but you're not just an avid PC gamer. You also are, very much into building.
Yeah.
And you kind of talked a little bit how you got started. Tell me a little bit more about, getting started in that, how you learned about the different parts you need.
Okay. Well, my dad is a small business owner. So, the early years of him owning his business, he was the IT guy and the janitor and he was everything. So if he needed to go into the office like on a Saturday and work on some computers, because he had like 7 to 10 computers set up, I would go with him just because, I was a boy tagging along with dad to go do stuff. And over time, he figured out, hey, it's quicker. Like if you have to re-image a bunch of computers with Windows 98 or something, if you can teach your son how the couple keyboard commands you need and stuff, you can have more work being done because he can do that. And so I learned how to do that a little bit. And then he had me start helping like switch out hard drives and switch out memory sticks. And computers were a lot less user-friendly than they are now. But they still weren't that bad. And I just kind of started getting into it. And then probably around 2003 or so, when my parents' computer, we moved into a different house and it was more spread out. So I didn't want to go all the way downstairs and have to use my parents' computer in the library anytime I wanted to do anything because I wanted to start like using my own computer for school. So I just dug up enough spare parts that I could patch together a desktop that was, it was super slow. It was like 700 megahertz or something. But it was fast enough that I could do word processing and start learning Photoshop and stuff. So I started learning how to maintain computers by maintaining a very old computer that I wanted. And then from there, like I didn't do a ton else. I just did very minor computer maintenance and I got okay at the software side of PCs, but I never did much with building them again until 2008 when I built my first desktop. And then as soon as I brought it back to school, there was like half a dozen people who expressed interest in getting their own gaming desktops. And then like for the rest of my time in school, I don't think a month went by where I wasn't building one for somebody. And then all my jobs since then, like I've done tons of builds and stuff. Like, I don't know. I don't think I've done a ton of builds compared to people who do this stuff, but I've probably done like 30 or 40.
That's obviously still admirable.
It is.
For an enthusiast.
Yeah. Most of them weren't like enthusiast builds. Like basic word processing and light gaming rig or something, but
well, still, there's something about getting in there, putting the pieces together, and watching it boot up for the first time. And
it is
that little bit of success you feel, even if it's a word computer.
I did. My biggest success I felt as a PC builder was some friends of mine in school were in the design program like I was, so they were very like Macs are the best, and they couldn't tell you why. And this guy, his Mac was getting kind of old. It was him and his wife, and you're probably gonna be able to guess who I'm talking about, but I'll leave their names out. But it was him and his wife, both in the design program, and they had this iMac, and they were using it. And it got slower and slower and slower, and then finally broke. And it was going to be like $1,100 to fix it. So they had decided, okay, we're just going to get a new something. And they were looking at like what iMacs they could get for the price, and it just wasn't that impressive. So they asked me, like, he really loved Macs. We said, like, hey, man, like, do you think a PC would be better for the same money? And I said, tell you what, I'm going home for spring break. I will set you up a user account on my desktop, which for at the time was worth maybe $800. And I said, you use it over break, and then if you like it, I'll build you one just like it. And he texted me while I was on the way home and said, dude, this is so fast. Where can I get one of these? And it wasn't anything special. It was a Core 2 quad with 8 gigs of RAM. I mean, still a mechanical hard drive, still not an amazing graphics card. Like, it was fine. But it was so much faster. Like, that was a good moment for me, getting to build a computer for someone who previously thought like that was just a stupid thing that only high-end gamers and stuff did. And this is a guy who doesn't game at all. He just wanted to work on it. And him seeing like, heck, you can get like so much more performance for the money. And that was a good moment for me. It felt like, hey, this is actually like a positive thing. I can help people.
What was your favorite build? And it doesn't have to be like your absolute best build, like the fastest specs. Like, what was your favorite build?
My favorite build, like the finished computer, or my favorite build experience?
Well, you can give both. I'll let you do both.
I got to think about what the favorite build is. My favorite build experience, a place I used to work, like they didn't really need a full-time IT guy, so I was their designer, but I also did whatever IT work they needed. And they had a video production booth, and there was a lightning strike. And it turned out whoever had built the building had cut a couple corners on surge suppression. And it wiped out like $8,000 of equipment, including 2 desktops. And the insurance company cut us a nice fat check. And I had about a $1,500 budget a piece for 2 desktops that just needed to be able to do video recording, basic productivity tasks and video recording. So I ordered the parts, and when they came in, it was a stack literally 6 feet tall of computer parts. And I spent one day just building computers, and they were like exactly matched, except I used a cheaper processor in one, but same chipset, same motherboard, everything. And that was like a really awesome day at work. Just come in, build 2 super fast, overpowered computers, and get to deploy them. And I mean, they use them to this day. It's been a couple years, and they're still like way excessively fast for what they need. But that was pretty cool. As far as favorite builds, like there's aspects of different builds.
I mean, you have your favorite graphics cards.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like I said, it doesn't have to be the fastest graphics card, but the one that you just probably got the most enjoyment out of.
I would say one of the funnest builds I think I worked on was a guy in my dorm. He had gotten a little bit of a budget together and wanted to build a computer. And this was right when the i5 2500K had come out. And those things were beast overclockers. And like, I think stock speed was like 3.4 or 3.6 gigahertz. And I got it to boot at 5.1.
Wow.
And it was hot. Like, I mean, it was on the limits of like responsibility, but we started at 4 and worked our way up 50 megahertz at a time. And by the time we got to 4.7, which at the time was a lot, we were just giggling like crazy. Like, it was like 3 in.the morning. We'd been eating sugary snacks for a long time. Like, we just couldn't believe that this was actually happening. And we just edging it up, got to 5.1. It started getting so hot, we backed it down, I think to 4.5. He just kept it at that because he didn't really need the extra for it. But like, because that was like pulse pounding, which sounds super lame to say, but that was like a pulse pounding, holy crap, I can't believe this is working.
Hey man, living on the edge.
And then
some people jump out of planes, some people overclock too.
I've done other cool stuff. and I think I don't know what would be my, like, if I have a favorite build for me personally, like I really enjoyed this last modification I did a couple months ago where I rebuilt my entire computer into a new quiet case because I did like my cable management this time is perfect. Nothing's just wedged in there. Nothing's got lazy zip ties around it. Like it all goes exactly where it needs to. It's neat. It's ordered. I have an awesome cooling setup. I did the math on how much air I was pulling in and pushing out. Like I just took my time and did it exactly right.
So it was probably your most mature build.
It was. Yeah, it was the most like I don't want any fancy lights. I don't want any crazy features. I want a black box that's quiet, keeps everything running stably, and I'm never going to have to think about. And that's what I built. So that was like, it took me the longest, but I think I had the most pride when I was done of like, this isn't this isn't a potato masher cobbled together out of parts and stuck in a corner. Like this is a serious computer. And I like that.
I think when you do your first build, you probably go for like the cheapest because.
Oh, I did.
And then as you get like a little bit more confident in it, you go for like the super, super fancy cases. I think that have the lights glaring and 10 fans going.
I think my first case was like $80. It was an Apivia case, but it had all the lights and the window, and it came with a shiny chrome colored blue power supply. Oh. That did burn up on me. That's how I learned that lesson. But I went for the fancy one. I mean, it was a horrible case, but it looked fancy to like a 17-year-old kid. I was like, ooh. This is the stuff right here.
This is the super thin metal that like.
Oh yeah, like it was. I think it might have been aluminum. If it was steel, it was incredibly thin steel. Like it bubbled if you touched it. And, that was before you had nice features like cutouts for the CPU on the back of the motherboard tray, and toolless installs. Forget about it. Everything was case screws, and it would like cut you if you touched it in the wrong way. So I think every young builder has to do that at some point.
That had its moments. It was fun in its own.
The mid 2000s, I think, were a dark time stylistically for gaming builds, but it was better than the beige crap that came before it.
All right, so switching gears, I'm going to ask you a little bit more about you as a person. Tell us a little bit about your hobbies, the kind of things you're into, outside of the podcast, outside of just gaming.
My hobbies have changed a lot. Like I used to be I mean, that's probably true of most people. I'm sure like the stuff you were into when you were a teenager, you look back and you go, who cares? But
well, I used to be in a doo-wop group and hang out on like the corners and no, I'm just kidding. I'm not that old.
Used to run moonshine.
During the Prohibition.
When I was a teenager, I started working pretty young. Like I started working when I was 12. Before anyone gets upset, it was one morning a week. And it was for one of my dad's employees. She was an elderly lady, but she was still like in very good shape, still working and stuff. She still does to this day, actually. And she had like a bunch of dogs she raised. Like she bred German Shepherds and did dog training and stuff. So she had a bunch of dog kennels, and it was just a little bit too much for her to keep up with that and mowing her grass and everything while working a full-time job. So I started working for her one morning a week, just taking care of her stuff. And, I was making, I think, $30 a week or something. And because at the time I was into cars, like video games were fine and whatever, but I really, really wanted to get a car. Never mind the fact that I wasn't going to be driving for like 4 years. But like that was like
no, $30 a week. You got to start pretty early.
That's how I saved for my entire car. Like by the time I started working landscaping, when I got a driver's license, I'd already saved up everything I used to buy my first car. And so I was really into cars, and then I worked landscaping. So I was into kind of redneck stuff. And then music. I played tons and tons of music, like pretty much every night of the week. I was in a couple different bands. So I would either have a show or practice or getting together to play music with my friends just to jam around. And so pretty much my car, work, and music, and then school as a distant fourth were pretty much everything I did until I went off to college. Like I talk about what I did for gaming, but that was only when I had time, like on the weekends or late in the evening or something. Like I was much less of a homebody than I am now. But I'd say my biggest things were cars and music. And then when I went to college, having a car was more about convenience and transportation than it was about the wonderful thrill of driving, because I didn't have a job to maintain it anymore. And I had like an early 90s BMW. So like a really awesome car for a 16 or 17-year-old, but not a cheap car. Just in maintenance, like it wasn't that much to buy. It was maybe like $4,500 or something. But any of the maintenance was pretty expensive. So I had to kind of scale down how much I enjoyed cars for a while. And that's when I started getting more into gaming. And then I stopped really playing music as much just because I didn't have the opportunity. Like I tried to join a band in school, but it was just so hard to make the logistics work and to get reliable people to play with that I just kind of drifted away from that.
As a musician, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, like, I mean, I guess the thing is, like, when I was playing music all the time, you know, it wasn't anything for me to spend a couple $100 on a piece of music gear I wanted, because I was using it constantly and I was getting paid like $500 a week under the table landscaping. So, you know, if I wanted to buy like a $1,200 guitar amp or something, it was like, heck yeah, like this makes total sense. And then you go to college and you just look at it in your closet and you're like, what am I going to do with this thing? So I told myself when I first got into music that I wasn't going to, you know, people like flip gear all the time. And I told myself when I was really young and I only had one cheap guitar, I was like, you know, I should probably think this in a higher pitched voice. If I ever get rid of this, I'm just going to find someone who needs it. I'm going to give it to them. And then, so when I was upgraded to a nicer guitar, I had a friend who was looking to get into playing electric guitar. My guitar, like, it was a crappy no-name Stratocaster knockoff. And I sold it, or no, I didn't sell it. I gave it to a friend. Like, it wasn't worth anything, so it wasn't like that nice of a gift, but he'd been wanting to get into it. He only had like an old Spanish acoustic. And he really liked that.
Hold on, let me pause you there.
Yeah.
You had a $1,200 amp and a knockoff Stratocaster.
No, the knockoff Stratocaster
was just an extra one.
That was before that. That was when I had like the $100 Fender crap amp that everyone gets.
We've all had those.
Yeah. Oh no, I'll get to my good guitars. You want to talk guitars? Okay. So I tried to make a point whenever I got rid of gear to not sell it, to just give it away to somebody who, you know, liked playing music or anything else. Because it was never like, I spent a lot of money on stuff, but it was not really worth that much money in the grand scheme of things. And I liked music so much, I just wanted, you know, I wanted to help people out. And I feel like that's making me sound more generous than I actually am. It's not really the case, but like in that one particular instance, I thought it was fun to give the music gear away. But no. When I got that was a tube amp. It was a triple rectifier tube amp. Like, it was a half stack. So I had a cab built for me, custom by a company, with like my choice of speakers and cloth and plywood or whatever. And I had a Epiphone Les Paul that had been completely gutted. Every bit of electronics had been replaced. Because the problem with Les Pauls, I don't know if you're familiar with how they feel, but they're very...
They're like 500 pounds.
And they're very body heavy. Like, they don't balance well. Or some of them are super body heavy and some are super neck heavy, which I've never understood. They're not like SGs, which are super neck heavy for all of them. But so everything had been gutted. It had been rebalanced. It had all new hardware, active humbuckers, and it had been professionally set up by like this guitar guru who was my guitar teacher for a while. He was just amazing at setting up guitars. So this thing was perfect. Street price probably wasn't worth more than like $400 or $500, but it played and sounded amazing. Everyone I knew who ever tried it thought it was one of like the best guitars they'd ever played. And I didn't do most of the work to it. I got it from another guy who I knew who'd done most of the work and then had it set up. But that was like my baby. And then I had a Schecter C1 Elite, like a pure black dual humbucker electric guitar I really, really liked. And I played in like, not a metal band, but a hard rock band, like the mid-2000s had lots of. So I tuned that 2 steps down and had the heaviest gauge strings I could comfortably get over the posts on it.
Practically bass strings.
You couldn't tune it up to standard. It would flex the neck so hard. Like, it would probably crack the neck if you tried to tune to standard. But that thing sounded awesome. It would hold its tune forever. I had that, and then I had my triple rectifier tube amp, and I had my Line 6 solid state backup amp, also like a 212. I had my pedals, like I had different straps for each guitar because I had them taped together. Like I took all the screws out that held in the straps and reseated them with like Gorilla Glue and extra reinforcements so I could spin my guitar over my shoulder because that was cool for a while. I
think that was kind of cool in like the 80s.
I feel really lame saying most of this out loud, but like I had my setup exactly the way I wanted it. And then over time, it just dwindled and dwindled and dwindled. And then finally, a year and a half ago, when I was living in the camper, I kind of had that aha moment where I was like, I knew I was done with music for the most part, and I wasn't upset about it.
You'll never be done.
Well, like I'll never be done, but like I was like, I'm not really playing music right now. If I ever want to again, I'll get back into it. But like, there was this girl I know, a friend of my younger sister's, and she loved playing guitar, and she would borrow mine every time she had a gig. She'd borrow that Les Paul, which was the only guitar I had left, and she would borrow that one because she loved how it sounded plugged in clean with no effects on it or anything, no distortion, nothing. Plugged straight into a system. It sounded very mellow, had a nice bluesy breakup to it, and she absolutely loved it. So I just went up to her and I was like, look, I'm not playing it. It's just gathering dust. Like, if you promise me that I can borrow it someday if I ever need it, just take it and enjoy it. And like, that was kind of the moment where I officially stopped being a real musician, I'd say.
And she went on to be Sheryl Crow.
No, no, she still just plays music. But because at that point I was mostly running sound. Like, anytime I was involved with music, I was running sound, which I really enjoy. I love being a sound man.
It's fun when you get on the other side, when you've listened to it and said, yeah, I kind of want it to sound more like this. You then, force yourself to get on that technical side and start learning.
Yeah, I think it would make me a better musician if I got back into that because I know more of how to get what I want. Mm-hmm. But that, like, that was kind of one of that, I guess, I don't know how I got on this rabbit trail, but I think that was like the biggest interest of mine that I got into and was huge into, and it was like all consuming for a while. And then now it's pretty much like not even a part of my life anymore.
So now you're into cars, but you're not one of those people that has to go out and buy a new sports car. You've got kind of a different take on, how you approach cars.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I don't like debt. So any cars I've ever had have been decently cheap cars. I love cars. Like, I've been reading Car and Driver ever since I was 12. I read everything I can about new cars. I like touching cars, looking at cars, taking pictures of cars. I love cars. But when it comes time to actually own cars, I like fun or unique cars. I don't really care about like the fastest, or I used to care like if my BMW was faster than my friend's cars or if it had a better sound system or any of that stuff. And now I like enjoyable stuff.
So it's more about the experience than the specs. It's kind of like a console.
Honestly, yeah. I mean, it's about, well, no, I would say it's like a console as far as my appreciation of it, but I love working on it myself. So any car I really enjoy, I have to be able to get under the hood and play around with it myself. Even if it's not the fastest or the best, I like being involved. So, like, really my only prerequisites for owning a car are it needs to have a manual transmission, and
naturally
it needs to not be like super dead or rubbery. The car needs to feel a little bit alive, even if it's slow. I want it to feel a little bit alive, and I really like those. But I mean,
how you drive it makes it feel zippy, even if it doesn't have a lot of horsepower.
Yeah.
You can drive it to make it feel like a fun, zippy car.
Yeah. Like, I don't need to be thrown back in my seat every time I accelerate. I just like to have a good steering feel and have it feel peppy, if I downshift or something, and I can get a ton of enjoyment out of that, which fortunately that's a lot cheaper than throw you back in the seat power.
Yep. So when you were a kid, we talked about this a little bit before, outside of this conversation. Mm-hmm. You had a special hobby as a kid that you actually took kind of seriously. What would that be?
Oh, now I think I know the right answer. I don't want to give the wrong one. Legos? Are you thinking Legos?
Yep. You did talk about Legos earlier.
Yeah.
You talked about playing some Lego games, but you actually did Legos a little bit more in depth than just the games.
I was hardcore into Legos. And Legos were like super expensive. So once I got like a decent collection, my parents stopped buying them for me. I mean, it's like highway robbery how much some of those Lego sets cost. But
as a parent, I know.
Yeah, I'm assuming you know that now. You have a young son. You're probably very familiar with that.
Yes,
but
they haven't gotten any cheaper. I can tell you that.
But I loved Legos. I would spend hours playing with Legos because I was homeschooled, so I had like the nice benefit of whenever I got my school done, I could do whatever I wanted. So, most days I was done before most of my friends got home from school just because I didn't have all the class changes and long lunch period and everything else they did. So I could do the more schoolwork in less time, which as a kid doesn't feel like a privilege. But I played lots and lots of Legos. So when I was, I think, 14 or 15, me and my sister, my best friend at the time, and then my sister's best friend, and then one other guy, we entered a Lego Robotics competition, which meant you had to build these robots with Legos and using their little servo motors. And they had to do certain tasks, like there was a game board they built for you, like the size of a pool table. And there were tasks like pick up this CD and put it over here, climb these steps, drive along these colored flags, stop at the correct colored one, knock it down, like super basic tasks. But you had to build a robot that could do as many of those tasks as possible in 5 minutes, and then you'd be judged at a competition. So you had to program. Did you ever play with the Lego Robotics?
I did not, but
it was pretty cool. It was intuitive because they had their own programming language, kind of, that was made out of icons.
Mm-hmm.
So you were programming commands like go this amount, stop here, operate this servo motor for this duration. Like you did all of that, but like with these little icons. So it was simple enough that teenagers could learn it pretty easily, enough to get in-depth stuff. But I was the builder. So like one of the other guys,
master builder.
Well, he would like figure out how to do all this stuff, and then he'd give it to me, and I would figure out how to make it smaller and how to make it modular. Because we didn't want to make one robot that could do everything. We made one robot that had detachable pieces that ran off the same motor. So it would drive back to the little base where we were allowed to touch it. There was only one spot on the board we could touch it. It would drive back there after every couple tasks, and we would swap out. Like it was like a tractor taking off the front loader and putting on, a forestry attachment or something. It was the same concept. We would just swap out attachments, and it would go do other tasks. So I was the guy who figured out how to make that, smaller, faster, and easier to do so that we wouldn't mess it up when we actually went to competition.
You'll be happy to know that's actually still really popular in schools.
Awesome.
Like they still do competitions, and I think it's mostly at the middle school level. I mean, I'm sure they do something at the high school level too.
High school, I don't think it is as popular because we went to the only competition, like real one we ever entered, was for our whole state. And I mean, I forget how many teams were there. It couldn't have been more than like a couple hundred kids max. I bet it was like 150 kids, like 5 to 10 kids a team. So like it wasn't that many. It actually was funny. The chaperone for our group, who like was kind of our team leader, he was a NASA engineer. So our game board that we practiced on was perfect. It was exactly to spec. And when we got to the competition, some of their game boards were not exactly to spec. They were built by, just dads putting them together. Yep. And he like threw a fit and wouldn't let them do the competition until he went through every single one with like a tape measure and a drill and adjusted everything until it was exact.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
Real world, I mean.
And that's actually, I've got a good, I feel like I'm dragging this on too long, but I've got a good follow-up story about a totally different competition with the same dad, like totally different genre. But we did end up winning, probably because we had everything so exact on our practice table that we had programmed our robot like to the quarter inch. We could, which you can't get a lot more precise than that because they've got like little rubber wheels and they spin and stop and stuff. But we had it exactly how we wanted to do it. And I think we got every single thing on the board done in like 4 minutes or something. because we had just been, I think we took it more seriously than the other kids, not because we wanted to, but just because we thought everyone else would be. And so like we were really prepping for battle, and most of the other kids, this was like a fun afternoon project or something.
Right.
But yeah, we did end up winning. I thought that was pretty fun. I never did it again. I kind of outgrew that pretty quickly. Like they don't let, I don't know if colleges do that or anything, but I never saw any more opportunities to do it.
I can't remember which college it is. I don't know if it's Oxford, but they're actually, I saw that they're hiring a professor of Legoology.
Wow.
So, I mean,
someone is feeling very justified in their career choice right now.
Who knows? But any regrets not going into engineering or anything like that?
Wow, well, you're going to talk about some real personal insecurities here. Sometimes I was very good at math. I was terrible at like biology and chemistry. But I was very, very good at math, but I hated math.
Mm.
I mean, I think my average in high school was like a 105 or something in math. Like I was good at math, but that's not bragging because it was a miserable soul-sucking experience and I dreaded it every single day. And the day I was done with math was like one of the happiest days of my life. So
would that be in college when you were done with math?
No, I actually finished it all in community college. I did dual enrollment in high school.
Oh, nice.
So like
nice.
I was done with math, I think by my 11th year of high school. Because since I was homeschooled, like one of the perks is you can work as fast as you want. So I think I was doing algebra in like 5th grade or 6th grade, something like that. I might be remembering that wrong, but like I was already doing calculus by 9th grade or pre-cal. So I just finished early and that was good. But like, I sometimes wonder if I wasted my education because I went into an art field, which is a very like hard to quantify thing.
Right.
And I've got friends, like my best friend growing up went on to be a pharmacist, and people always compared us as being two peas in a pod when it came to academics and stuff. And so he's like a doctor of pharmacology. You know, he easily makes 6 figures and stuff. And I've got other friends who went on to be blah, blah, blah. And I do wonder sometimes, did I waste my opportunity or did I just pick the thing I kind of wanted to do and make the best of it? And I'm not sure like there's a right or wrong answer, but I do enjoy aspects of
You love what you do now, though.
I do. I love what I do.
And that's ultimately what's important.
I think it is. I think I probably could have been a very well-paid something else, but I think it would have required much more academic stuff than I would have enjoyed. Like, I don't think I would get as much personal satisfaction out of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, money will buy a little bit of personal satisfaction. Yeah.
Speaking of Patreon.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
So there's plenty of like self-doubt that goes along with that. Of did I make the right choice, whatever. I think I made a good choice, but I think I definitely could have pushed myself a little bit farther. You know, I don't think I was excessively smart or anything. I think I was just really good at a couple things and then average at most other stuff. And I could have focused more on those couple things, but they just weren't that fun.
Yeah, I mean, and when you're in college and thinking about that stuff, I don't know if you made the decision in college of what to study.
I went in college. I thought I was going to do video broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
I'd never heard of graphic design. Like, I never even thought that someone designed all this stuff that I looked at. And then my roommate was a graphic designer. He was in the program, and his homework looked like a lot of fun. And the video program at my college was kind of It just wasn't that great. You know, you went there. And so his homework looked better. So when it was time to actually officially declare a major, I was like, yeah, screw it. Like, I had zero artistic leanings, never done design work of any kind. I'm like, why not? This looks fun. Let's do that. And here I am.
See, I had almost a similar experience, except I wasn't even in, like, a communications field.
What field were you in?
Psychology.
Oh, okay. I imagine anything would look like more fun.
Yeah, so while I'm, writing papers and stuff, one of my roommates was making business cards and making CD printables and stuff like that. And it's like, wow, this is really fun. He's, shooting videos.
Did you have the foresight to know that it would be impossible to get a job with a psychology degree, or?
It wouldn't have been impossible, I don't think. Not for what I wanted to do.
Okay. Well,
we'll save that for another conversation.
When I interview you, we'll do it then.
This is all about you.
Yay, me. Let's talk more about me.
Just a couple more questions.
Okay.
So we're going to turn it now towards the podcast itself.
Okay.
And you are, pretty much you and Dave are the founding members.
Oh, wait. Can I tell one more story?
You may.
I'm sorry. I feel like such a narcissist doing this, but
well, when it's my conversation, you can feel like not a narcissist.
I told you about that dad, like the engineer who was super.
Oh, yeah.
So we were in a boys group, like me and my best friend, this guy's son, like very similar to Boy Scouts. And they had these big camp out things, like the Boy Scouts do.
Right.
And they decided to have a unique competition one year. And they said, everyone has to build a boat. Every group, every chapter has to build a boat out of cardboard. You can do whatever you want to it, but it has to be built completely out of cardboard and fasteners. And then you're going to bring them, and we're going to have a race in this lake. And this guy was an engineer. And so his first thought was, there's absolutely no way we are losing this. And it couldn't be any 2-part stuff, no 2-part epoxies or anything like that. But that was like the only rule. And he figured out how to paint rubber onto pieces of cardboard. And then he designed a canoe that could be built with one continuous piece of cardboard and built it. And we won. And then we built another one the next year and won. And then he got tired of like the 200 man hours it took to build one. And the next year he went all out, built the best one ever. And me and my best friend and a couple other guys, we helped him. And we used that boat for 3 straight years. And the year they finally made a rule that said you had to build a new boat every year. And they made that specifically for us. Most people didn't even finish. I mean, it's cardboard boats, like they sink. So people would do fun stuff like design them to look like submarines or aircraft carriers or whatever. And ours was a canoe. One year we, not officially, but technically won first and second. We made it all the way around, and there was like, heck, why not? And paddled all the way around again and beat everyone else a second time. Like, this thing was about as fast as a regular canoe. And that was one of the high points of my athletic career. Like, I did running and I did swimming competitively, but this stupid, not worth anything cardboard boat race was one of the highlights. But like, I can't take a lot of credit for it. I just paddled the thing. But
those long arms.
Oh, yeah. But when we were done with it, like when they made that rule that year that this is, you got to make a new one every year, we won first. We kind of won second, but they didn't give it to us. And then we rowed back out into the middle of the lake and then produced a Ziploc bag from, the front of the boat, dumped diesel all over the boat and gave it a Viking funeral in the middle of the lake and just let it burn itself down to a
proper death.
Yes, exactly. A proper death. We got like people were cheering and shouting for us and we carried it back to our campsite and everyone was like high-fiving us. But yeah, that guy was an awesome engineer. Sorry. Anyway, back to the podcast.
Yeah, I played stuff like baseball and normal stuff, but that's cool.
I didn't really do much of that.
All right, so as I was asking, how did the podcast come about?
I feel like I've told this story 1 billion times.
Well, we can tell it 1,000,000,001.
Fine, James.
You can tell the abbreviated version.
Okay. Well, we thought DayZ Standalone was coming out in winter of 2012. And I thought, hey, it would be fun to like do some sort of weekly thing about DayZ. Because Dave was one of the more popular DayZ YouTubers out there, certainly one of the first. And he wouldn't go on to be like the most popular. Other people grew past him for various reasons, but at the time he was one of the better known DayZ YouTubers. And I thought it would be cool to have some sort of like weekly thing where we could talk about DayZ. So I suggested the idea of doing a podcast, and originally Dave wasn't that jazzed about it. But I kind of won him over. I was like, we can use it to promote our different channels and like the stuff we're doing and stuff. He was like, okay, we'll give it a try. And we thought, okay, we'll start it a couple of weeks before DayZ comes out so we can, figure out how we're going to do this before it actually starts. And we did that, except DayZ didn't come out for a year. So we started out with me and him and then a couple other guys who played DayZ with us. And then we kind of branched out into Battlefield and then started talking about a few more games. And Joel had kind of become a regular fixture on the podcast. And then one night he said he was just inviting his friend James on. And we've been through plenty of like lineup shifts and stuff because there's so many people in our friend group, our gaming group. For a time, it was just different people hopped on and hopped off whenever they were available. But then I think it was probably like 50 episodes ago, we really started locking it down to it's the four of us. pretty consistently now. And so it kind of just evolved into what it is now. Like, we never set out to do exactly this, but people started enjoying it, so we kept doing it. And now, like, it's time-wise and reception-wise, it's one of the bigger things we do.
So what do you feel like you, Jeremiah, bring to the dynamic of the podcast?
Oh, man.
I mean, you are obviously kind of the ringleader when we go on air.
That's probably, like, I think that's probably the main thing I bring. Like, I don't have the shtick like Dave is the hardcore PC guy, or Joel's crazy, or you have the deep voice and lots of wisdom and old man crankiness. I think I'm probably, and maybe this is just my perspective, I think I'm one of the more neutral people in the group. But I think my main thing I contribute is I can, as you've seen, 50 minutes into this short conversation, I can talk for a very long time about pretty much anything. Like, you can give me any little topic and I can just go on and on and on. I don't know if most of it's good, but like, I'm very comfortable talking in front of people. I can talk to you the same way I could talk in front of like 400 or 500 people, which is not how, like, that definitely did not used to be the case. I used to be deathly afraid of public speaking. But I've just gotten to the point where that doesn't really faze me. So it makes me an easy leader of the group because I can keep stuff organized and keep stuff moving along and keep stuff kind of feeling light and hopefully friendly feeling most of the time, while still covering ground. Like, I like stuff being organized. I like stuff going smoothly. I like accomplishing stuff. And so I think that makes me a pretty decent host. Not to say any of the rest of you couldn't do an awesome job hosting, because I think you could. But I think that's the main thing I bring to it is I'm able to be that role of the guy who keeps everything moving along and lets the other stronger personalities on the podcast shine through.
We probably wouldn't do it if you weren't hosting it. I mean, there is something to say about the drive that you have.
Yeah.
That keeps it going every week to make sure everything does get finished. And
right. Well,
spit out.
I think it probably still would be done just on a much more relaxed production quality and schedule and everything.
I mean, we all have very laid back personalities. I mean, I would never host a podcast.
Right.
Surprise.
I think you're doing good here. I don't know.
You know, I mean, we each bring a different thing. I mean, there's something about, like I said, you do have the gift of gab, and it's not unintelligible at any point. I mean, you say a couple little quirky things here and there, but
right.
You know, you definitely bring that strive to make the podcast really good, to make sure the audio's crisp and make sure, you know, it's up in a timely manner and that we're really focusing on, you know, our audience and making sure that they're getting the best benefit for listening.
Yeah, I do. I really enjoy doing that. Like, I don't ever feel the strong need to be the guy in charge of stuff unless there's nobody in charge of something. And then I feel the strong need because I want somebody to be in charge, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Like when came out to help Joel with Norman, which I think was the first time I met you in person. It was great because Joel was in charge, and Joel had everything going. He had his strong plan. He knew exactly where everything was going. It was awesome because I just got to cruise along for a couple days and just do whatever needed doing, which is rare. Usually I end up like inserting myself into the hierarchy of stuff because I want to help stuff run smoothly and get done. And but I don't know. I never feel like, well, I need to be in charge of this unless something just no one's in charge. And then I feel like, hey, someone ought to do this, and might as well be me. I'll take the power.
So last question.
Okay.
What is your favorite part of doing the podcast?
The hours and hours of behind the scenes work that no one sees or appreciates. No. I think it would probably be cliche to say just doing the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time like we actually hit record on all the mics, it does feel like now I just get to relax and just do the show.
Right.
The same way like practice when I did music, you know, you practice and practice and practice, and that's aggravating and tiring, and everyone gets cranky and everything else. And then
once you're on stage,
one or two songs in, you get the groove in, and you're like, I don't care. I can do this all night. This doesn't even matter. And
some of them have almost gone that long.
We're trying to be better, but yeah. So I think that's the best part, is actually just recording the podcast. because at that point it feels like we're just cruising. You know, the recording the actual podcast is usually not that stressful or difficult or anything, because I've already prepped what we want to talk about, and I've got my notes of things I want to cover, and I know any changes I want to make or whatever else. So unless things go wrong, you know, that's just easier going.
All right. Well, this has been the Casual Shenanigans Conversations. I'm James, and we've been here with Jeremiah, listening about him. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everybody, and be sure to catch the Casual Shenanigans conversation James is going to do with everybody else in the podcast. It should be an awesome time. They'll probably all be shorter and less self-involved than me, but... Thanks, James. Thanks for doing this, man.
Bye.